Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Tales of a TC. I am joined by the beautiful Ella Ray today.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. TC life.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's a little chaotic in the summer, but we are fighting it through on the other side. Um,
Always. So,
so today I kind of wanted to bring up a uncommon topic in our space. And it's really kind of about vetting your seller and making sure that you have the right seller for a creative transaction.
right.
Have you ever experienced a time that you just didn't feel the seller was a good fit for a transaction?
Probably more than I'm happy to admit,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
And what do you think some of those red flags are when you're going through the transaction?
For me, it's when they're reluctant to give up information. It's almost as if they're not aware that in this type of transaction, they're going to need to provide complete transparency with a lot of things: social security numbers, date of birth, mortgage logins, portal information. And it becomes very difficult to work with sellers like that because you already know if it's this difficult in the beginning, what is it going to be like 10, 15 years down the road when you need to reach out to them for something or another. So those are definitely red flags right away.
1,000% agree. And I think that sometimes sellers can be hesitant because maybe that process was not thoroughly explained to them, or they didn't read the contract and they're just signing really fast and they don't really understand. um,
Right.
but what is concerning is that after everyone's had these conversations, that the seller still stands on the side of, I refuse to participate, basically. So for our audience, can you kind of explain the importance of why we'll go piece by piece, like why the full social is required in order for management of the mortgage?
So for us, I mean, we might have, of course, we'll have the power of attorney, but there's certain instances where they just still won't give information. And we need to be able to have that full social security number and that date of birth because throughout, I'd want to say like 90% of the mortgage companies that I work with, those are the key factors that they're looking for. That's the key piece. Those are the key pieces of information that they're needing. And when we can't provide that, then it becomes problematic. And let's say the sellers decided, I'm going to go live in the jungle of Costa Rica for the rest of my life now. Like, what do you do at that point? You can't get in touch with them. You can't do anything with the bank. Now you're stuck and you have no way of solving this problem. So for us, it's best to get it up front so that we don't end up needing to, reach out to them at some point later on.
100%. And like, if the servicer changes, recently I had a situation where traditionally you only need the last four to like request a payoff or something, and we actually had to have the last six to request
Right.
a payoff. And these terms, all of these things can change at any given moment, that then make it to where the buyer can't successfully manage. Like if they
Right.
get locked out of the portal and they need a reset or anything like that, if they don't have this bandit of information, they can't successfully manage the actual mortgage.
And as much as the seller wants to make sure that they're selling this to someone who's going to take care of their loan, they're almost setting up the buyer for failure by not providing everything that the buyer is going to need in order to do that.
Yes. And I have to stress to buyers out there everywhere that when you're dealing with a difficult seller through this escrow process, the reality is, like you said earlier, this is not going to get better later. And this is why it's imperative to not be emotionally connected to buying a specific house.
Right. Right. Especially when there could be so many problems later on down the line. Let's say said buyer decides, you know what, I don't even like this structure anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel safe with this anymore. And they go and they call the bank and they tell the bank that they sold the house. It's just red flags at the very beginning mean red flags all the way through. There's really, unless that seller completely understands and acknowledges and is okay with all of the terms of a sub two, and don't count on them reading that contract, because I can guarantee you that they're not reading through that. I
Yes.
have sellers, and wholesalers who will get on a Zoom and they'll go through the entire contract together, making sure that they have it recorded, that the seller understands everything that they're signing. Even as far as saying, well, you know what, if you're not sure and you don't feel 100% comfortable, reach out to your attorney if you'd like to, and make sure that they understand, or that you understand the terms. And oftentimes it doesn't even get that far, because they understand through the Zoom, and by us literally reading the contract to them. And these Zooms can last, an hour, maybe even longer, depending on how many questions that they have. But one thing is for sure, they walk away from that Zoom knowing exactly what they're getting into, and they are completely fine with everything that's required from them. You don't have that transparency up front, and you don't have those acknowledgments up front, you don't really know what you're going to walk into once you open escrow and you start that process and we start needing information from them. That's where we see as the TCs, because we're dealing with the sellers. It's not usually the wholesaler who's asking them for all of this information, and it's not the title company asking them for the information. There's really no way, and the buyer certainly can't ask them for that information before closing, because no seller is going to want to give that away to them. So if you don't have a TC who can really tell you, hey, listen, this seller is very hesitant, you might need to kind of get in there and explain exactly what's going on. If you don't have that up front, you could walk away from that closing table married to a seller that really didn't want to be married in the first place. So yeah, it's important.
100%. And right now I'm working a transaction where we even tried, like I understood that they're uncomfortable sharing their social. So we had everything set up to be shared with servicing so that servicing could assist if something happens down the road. And then the seller refused to set up servicing, refuses to give third-party authorizations or power of attorneys. And so the reality is that, and I have one right now, that a year ago we sold the property to an investor. He's had a tenant in the house the whole time. He's never missed a payment. He's owned it for a year. It's an 85-year-old seller who had a realtor who we spent hours on the Zoom going over the contract, answering every single question along the way to resolve the situation. And she is now calling the mortgage company every day to call the note due because she wants her house back.
Oh
And she
my
said
God.
if she can't have her house, no one will have her house, and she wants it foreclosed on. Now, luckily, he can apply to get the payoff, and he's refinancing, which is what we do for our buyers. But if you don't have a social, you can't order a payoff once that seller starts becoming exceptionally difficult to even try to refinance the loan so that you can keep the house that you've been paying for.
Right. It's so important.
It
That
is.
that initial information exchange is so vital to the success of a transaction like this. And you can't gloss over it. There's a lot of wholesalers who will just get the seller to sign because all they see at the end of the day is the big fat assignment fee. They don't care, and they won't. I've gotten contracts sent to me that don't even have the disclosures. And I tell them straight, like up front, I'm going to be sending these disclosures over to the seller. Either I'm sending them or you're going to send me the signed disclosures, but I'm not working on this transaction without them. Because how did we know as TCs, we're not typically involved in those Zoom calls. Sometimes we are, but in the instances that we're not, how do we know for sure that the seller understands what they're getting into? And no, you're not going to include them in the closing packet on day of closing. No, that's just a disaster waiting to happen. And it makes me feel very uncomfortable when I work with wholesalers who don't have the integrity to really get those things signed up front and want to wait until the day of closing, because that just tells me that you have an idea that the seller really doesn't know what they're getting into.
Which
It's
means that if you're an end buyer, you need to make sure that that's part of your assignment agreement. Because if you're not allowed, like we come across deals where the wholesalers don't even allow us to talk to the seller through escrow. So if you're not allowed to talk to the seller, they don't have these disclosures, and you're the end buyer, you don't know for sure that that seller is on board with what's going to happen.
Right. I think I've had one instance where the wholesaler didn't want me to talk to his seller. And I can tell you that deal didn't go through. And the seller actually was super annoyed and upset and basically said, I'd rather let the house foreclose than deal with this man, being the wholesaler. That the wholesaler threatened him that if he didn't sign the closing docs, that he was going to sue him or some crazy nonsense. And I'm like, how do you can't operate in that way. Like, we're supposed to be here as investors to help sellers out of predicaments that they can't get out of any other way. So why would you put them in a worse situation than they were when you met them? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think, people, and even I actually had this happen today where the seller was not married when he purchased the house, but is married now. And title has let him know like that his spouse is going to need to sign the closing docs or some kind of affidavit stating that they don't have any interest in the property. And he's like, well, why does my spouse have to sign? So now, like, let's say we get the spouse on board and she's not, happy about the sale of the house, then what happens? Right? There's all these little things that can happen that if you're not fully open at the very beginning and transparent about these things, it's a recipe for disaster. And that's just like one thing, right? It's not even everything. So
Right. That's not all the financials and the weird things the mortgage companies do with mortgage statements, or extra liens that sellers forgot about, or there's so many extra layers that you just want to make sure that marriage is right to start.
absolutely.
And if your seller is difficult, this is another thing I tell my buyers all the time. If a seller says at any point of the transaction, I don't want to do this, it is best to just let them walk away. Like,
Right.
you can't force someone to have a sub two, because it's going to hurt you in the long run and your financial investment. And we've had situations where I have clients that purchase almost novation style, like they'll purchase a property sub two to quick flip and put it back on the market within a few months. And sometimes those sellers are not as eager to share everything because they know it's such a short period of time. And so
Right.
we will work with the attorney that we're going to close the second transaction with to make sure they have everything they need to get a payoff, to make sure everything is okay, have their authorizations. And so there are ways to work in scenarios. And that's why I'm sure, like me, you sit down with your buyers and you make sure you understand inside and out what they're doing, what they've told the seller, so that we can, there's always a solution. But if everyone's not participating, it's better to just not move forward.
Right. 1000%. Don't do it.
Facts. If your TC is like, this seller is a little bit crazy, you
Don't do
probably
it.
stick with that. Yeah.
Fun.
Because some of it is, since we're not the ones giving them cash to close or anything like that, they show a little bit more of their like realistic colors to us sometimes. And I had a transaction where we were doing a sub two on a HELOC. No matter how many times I told my buyer, this is a bad idea because this HELOC won't close, they could take the money out. And the seller was already like super shifty the whole time. He was not honest on his buyer form about being married. And then it came back that like so many like red flags. And then later he ended up taking out $25,000 on the HELOC after closing. And as a buyer, you don't have a lot of recourse. Like, it's going to cost you a lot of money to seek money from a seller you're never going to get money from.
Right.
And so
and sitting in front of a judge, letting them know, oh yeah, I purchased that house sub two. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation that you're going to have, right? It's not just about getting the money now. It's about disclosing the nature of the deal itself, which It's not that it's illegal, because it's not illegal to do a subject to, but it's just not something that many people are well versed in, and to have to sit in a courtroom and explain this, just don't. I mean, the due diligence on sub twos is so important. And you can't do the due diligence if you're the buyer or the seller. I mean, not the seller, the wholesaler.
Right.
So, and the title company is certainly not going in and checking a mortgage portal. That's
Yeah.
not happening.
And did you hear that some people are starting to fraudulently change the information on mortgage statements?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I tell all of my clients, I need to get the seller, I need to talk to the seller, and I need to get into the mortgage portal myself. Because guess what? At the end of the day, if I'm on a transaction, or any TC is on the transaction, and they haven't done that part of their due diligence, it comes back to bite us. And so
Yes, because
that's
I
a
want
must.
so tell me what happens if something goes wrong with a transaction in a year for the buyer, okay? The end buyer. Do you think the seller is going to pick up the phone when they call? No.
No,
Do you think the agent is going to pick up the phone when they call?
definitely not.
Wholesaler?
Nope.
What's the title company going to tell them?
We're done with this deal. It's closed.
The only people that answer the phone are us. And I think that sometimes that gives us a skewed nature because all we see are like the bad after. But
Right. Right. All of the horror stories, we hear them. Yeah.
yes. And so it's just imperative to do that well and do that upfront.
1000%.
And
And
so
not just that. I mean, as a wholesaler too, I think if you were the ones that brought the seller to the table and you got the seller to agree to this, at the very least, pick up the phone and see what's going on. Right? Like, don't ghost them. Don't think like, oh, I'm done. I got my assignment fee. I don't need to, talk to the seller anymore. Like, you have a responsibility, if you were the one that got that deal under contract, to at least see what's going on with them. Right? And most wholesalers are not vetting their end buyers. So you have even more of a responsibility to pick up the phone and talk to that seller at that point.
I am so glad you brought that up because I think that it is important to share
Right.
that you and I are having a workshop for that very thing.
Right.
Yes, we're going to teach everybody how to vet buyers, whether you're an agent, a wholesaler, a seller that knows you have to sell creatively. And we're going to take you so much deeper to understand why you have to vet them and the documents that you should request to thoroughly vet them.
Right.
And so I'm so excited to do that with you.
I am too. I think it's gonna be amazing. There's so much value to be had from this workshop. So really looking forward to it.
And then we also want to encourage that if you reach out to either one of us and you need any help with your transactions or you just have general questions, we're happy to work with you. And we also pay referral fees. So if you're listening to this and you have a friend that needs some help,
Yeah.
send them our way. Make sure you let them know that you sent them. That way we can go ahead and thank you for being that amazing resource for us.
100%. Yes, because so much of this business is word of mouth, and it's very important to make sure that people know that there's really good TCs out there who will help them through their transactions. So whatever that looks like, whether it's, hopping on a call, a consult, and talking to the seller, or walking them through the contract, or, we even stop foreclosures. There's so many different things that we can help with. So don't be afraid to give our names and let us know that you have referred clients over to us, and we'll be paying you for that.
Absolutely. We all win.
Right.
All right. Well, Ella, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Amanda. It's always great to see you. I'm excited for our workshop.
Yes, me too.